Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So in this video, we're going to look at mouse position. So I want us to know exactly where we are on the canvas with our mouse. So currently, it shows us what's happening when the mouse is moving. It shows us when the mouse is moving on the canvas. But the problem is we don't really know where the mouse is on the canvas itself. Because with canvas, it's all about putting things precisely in the X and the Y coordinate. So this is just a grid. Think of the canvas as a grid with pixels on the left to right, and top to bottom. So it's X, Y. The top left corner here is the 0, 0 position. And then the bottom right corner here is the maximum / maximum XY position. So what I want for now is, while the mouse is moving, I want it to show me the coordinates over here in this box there. So we go back to our code, and there's a div in here. So I want to add a second, this stuff is within a div. I want to add a second div over here. And this div, I'm going to give a class of, I'm going to call it cropped images. So you can put whatever class names you'd like here, it doesn't matter. So cropped images is over here, and let me put some styling to this one as well. So I'm going to copy that, and I'll do dot cropped images, and here I just want a background color of red so I can actually see where it is. So I'm going to refresh, and I don't see it anywhere. So what I'm going to do is the canvas holder here, I want to put a display of flex. Okay, now if I refresh, so we have the canvas, we should have the other thing here. And then on the cropped images, I want to put a flex of 1, so it takes up all the space that's available. Same thing with the canvas, so we have a flex 1 on both. So now I have my thing here, which is great. I can see it takes up all the full space that it needs to, just like the canvas over here. But because the canvas has a very fixed width, it takes up that number of space. So this is good. At least we have this thing here, and we have our canvas over here. So I want to capture this red object here. So I'm going to remove the red background here because we know it's there now. And all I want to do is capture it. So cropped images, let's put a const here as well. Const cropped images, maybe we call it cropped images div or something like that. You can call these things whatever you want, whatever is easier for you to remember. So let's put a dot there and the class name cropped images, like so. Now I can use it wherever I want, so I can bring this here. Now let me remove all these console.log on the mouse up and on the mouse down. But here where the mouse is down, we may need it here. So I'm going to do console.log. Now instead of console.log, what I'm going to use is say this cropped div.inner HTML, so that we don't have to look at the console all the time. Say is equal to, instead of mouse moved here, I want it to be equal to some text instead. So I'm going to use these backticks like that. This is above your tab key, I think, or below the escape key. So those two tick marks like that. I use those because they allow me to be able to put variables in there. So we want to know the mouse position. So I'm going to do mouse pose like this. Actually, instead of that, let's just put X and a full colon, and then Y and a full colon. So I know the XY coordinates. So the way I can get the XY coordinates of the mouse is through the event. So I'm going to use this E and put it there. There's a variable called client X and client Y. Now the reason I know this let me just put E here, is because if you do, let me put brackets here so I can put multiple stuff here. Now if you do a console.log of E, it's going to show you what it has. So I'm going to right click, refresh, and let's go ahead and use the console again. Now if I go here and click and drag, you'll see it shows me the event object. It tells me the name of the event is mouse move, and then there are a bunch of variables in here that you can make use of. So if I click here, you see it shows me the client X and client Y. These are the XY coordinates of the mouse. So there's a lot of things you can get from the event here. What was the target, etc., etc. But the only thing we want is the client X and client Y. So I'm going to refresh the page and close that. Let's come back. So client X and client Y it is. So here I'm going to say e.client and then capitalized X, and then here the same thing but client capitalized Y. Now this is a variable, so I'm going to do the $sign to convert it to a variable like that. That way it's evaluated before released into the wild. Okay, so let's go back, let's refresh, and if I click and drag, you will see on the right side here I'm getting X and Y coordinates. So let's move closer and see that. Click and drag, look at that. So now the funny thing is, if I go to the very top left corner of my canvas here, I don't see 0,0 here. This is not good. I see 138.50. And if I make it, I zoom out even more, it's gonna get even worse because now it's 300 by 51. So if you notice that Y is 50 and never really changes, though the X, let's see here, it does change a little bit, but not so much, but the X changes quite a bit. And that's because this does not take into account that the canvas is away from the 0,0 point of the entire page. So this XY is in reference to the whole page. The XY coordinates here are in reference to the entire page and not the canvas. So what we need to do is subtract the top and the left pixel positions of the canvas. That way we can have our 0,0 at the top here. So in order to subtract those, we can do minus canvas, right, dot offset X. Same thing here, we can do offset Y, just equal offset Y. That should solve the problem, I hope. So let me click and drag here. Okay, so those are not numbers, just says not a number. Okay, so let's look at what's going on. So canvas dot offset X, is that even a thing? So probably not. So whenever you find yourself not knowing what the object or function names are, just inspect, go to the console, and over here we can write some code. So if I click on the little book here, it's going to open a section here where I can type some code, but you don't need that book. You can close this and type directly here, because if I just type canvas like that and then I put dot like this, it gives me suggestions of what's possible in here. So what I want is something that says offset. So there's offset height, offset left, offset top, and so on. So I think I was supposed to use the offset top and left instead of X and Y. So those do not exist. There's no offset X. It's actually offset left and offset top. So that's how you go about figuring this thing out in case you forget. Okay, so let me close my console, refresh, and let's click and drag. Now watch closely. If I get, as I get closer to the corner here, you can see I'm getting very close to 0,0, which is more accurate. And there we go. We have X0, Y0. So at least now, as I click and drag around the canvas, it tells me where I am. So that's great. This is the end. This should be 500 and something. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Awesomeness. This is great. Okie doke. All right, so now that we know our coordinate system here, this is good. The next thing we want to do is import an image into the canvas. So we have to know how to do that. Okay, so let's put a button here we can click, and that should do the trick to add an image in there. So what I'm going to do is go to the div. This is where that div is, the one that has cropped images. But then within it, I want two divs again. This one will have a class of images, and this other one will have a class of controls. Okay. So controls and the actual images. The one with controls, we will need to add a few buttons here. So I'm going to add a button here and say load image, like that. Now we could use add event listener like we've done to add an event to this. Now I don't want to bloat this thing here, so what I'm going to do instead, I'll add the event listener directly here, since this actually already exists. I'm not creating this dynamically, this button I mean. So I'm going to say on click. Actually, even though we don't say, let me not put the on click listener. What I'm going to do instead is let's add a label. Okay, so we're going to add a label. I'm going to move my button within the label. Now the reason I'm using a label is because I want to put an input here, the file loader. So this input is going to be type file, and maybe the name, we can give it a name of image or something. So what I have here is this at this point in time. So I have a browse and a load image. So if I click on the browse, it brings me up this file browser. That's great. But because both of these things are inside a label, if I click even the button, it should actually give me the, oh, actually, unfortunately, button doesn't do that of all things. So what I'm going to do is, maybe if I change it to type button, let me try that. Okay, maybe that changes things, who knows? Doesn't seem to. So tough luck for the button here. Let me undo this. Doesn't seem to budge at all. Or maybe I can actually put this within here. Let me try. I've never tried this before, but let me just see for the sake of it if it works. Nah, it does not. Okay, terrible idea. So what I'm going to do here instead, I'll put a div like this. Now the reason I'm putting this div instead of just leaving the input as it is because it's hard to style this input, and so I don't like it. So I want to be able to click on the div instead, like what I'm doing now. If I click, it still opens this, and then I can hide that input thingy. So here I'm going to say style and say display none, like so. So that way it doesn't actually show. This one I'm going to add a class of button like that, so we can actually have styled buttons here. And so what I'm going to do is, let me just add some padding for now, 10 pixels to the button, and that's, let's see, now border, let's do solid, thin, and 888, like that. And then let's put cursor, pointer, all right, and then let's put display inline block. Okay, that is great. So I want it to just look kind of like a button. There it is. So now it's just a div, but if I click it, it actually brings me this. Then I can click to load an image. Now the image is loaded in here quite alright, but it doesn't show here. Okay, so this is what we will do in the next video.